You are not a tourist in time. You are a witness, and what you're about to remember may never leave you again. The air is too still for spring. Children's laughter once stitched into every corner of this town has vanished. Only the bells remain. And the wind. You crouch beside a wooden cradle in the church nave. It's empty, except for a cloth doll and the scent of fevered skin. On the wall nearby, tally marks scratched with desperate hands. 1, 2, 37. A woman passes you, eyes hollow, carrying a bundle too small to cry. She doesn't speak. None of them do now. And somewhere beyond the chapel doors, another tiny coffin is being carved. You were there when they stopped naming the dead, when they simply said, "Another child." And you remember, because you cannot forget. If what you're about to witness brings you new questions, or a deeper silence, consider subscribing to this channel. Not for the numbers, but so we can continue remembering these stories. Quietly, respectfully, together. And if you find value in what lingers after the telling, a like, a share, or even a pause to reflect would be more than enough. You are the village gravedigger, not by choice, not by training, but because someone had to do it, and the priest was too old. This is Provence, the year 1738. Spring has arrived, but no one welcomes it. For months, rumours spilled down from the north. Children in Lyon dying in their sleep, their skin darkened, their eyes swollen shut. Some called it divine punishment. Others said it was the breath of hell itself. By the time it reached your town, there were no more arguments. Only silence. And the sight of cradles turned face down. This isn't the Black Death. There are no rats. No boils. But what smallpox lacks in spectacle, it makes up for in cruelty. It seeks the young first. Not because they are weakest, but because their skin is unmarked. Their blood is still innocent. You watched a mother bury 3 sons in 1 week. You dug the hole yourself. The soil was too wet, the wood too thin. You stopped counting the dead when the list was longer than the living. What made this place different? Why here? Why now? Some blamed the midwives. Some, the travelling Romani. Some, the failure to pray hard enough. But there were deeper currents. Poverty, war, movement between cities, and a quiet truth few dared say aloud. That no one really knew why the children were dying. Not then, and not entirely now. But you remember, because you were there, and because the wind still carries their lullabies through the broken windows of the chapel. It began with a sound you almost missed, a cough. Not sharp, not deep, just the dry, scratching exhale of a child waking up wrong. You were passing by the bakery when you heard it, muffled behind the shutters of the Fournier house. You didn't stop. Coughs were common. Spring in Provence always brought a few. The mistral winds stirred the dust, and children's lungs were soft. But something about that cough stayed in your ear, a rhythm that didn't feel right. You didn't know then that it would be the first bell. Her name was Marie Claire, 6 years old, brown curls, wide eyes, always barefoot even in frost. Her mother sold lace. Her father had died in the olive press last harvest. She liked pigeons, sweet milk, and chasing dogs too large for her. You saw her 3 days before the first fever. She was sitting on the steps of Saint Antoine's chapel, swinging her legs and singing to herself. Her voice bounced between the stones like sunlight. By dusk, she had a fever. By morning, red spots began to bloom along her collarbone. Her mother said it looked like crushed beryestany, clustered, angry. The local doctor, a man with more pride than knowledge, called it heat rash. Gave her syrup, told her to rest. The spots spread, to her back, then her legs, then the soles of her feet. Her eyes swelled, her lips cracked, and when she cried, blood pooled in the corners of her mouth. Her mother screamed for help, but no one came. No one wanted to come. You didn't either. But someone had to. You carried her body to the chapel, light as a linen bundle, still warm. Her skin was slick with fever sweat, and her hair clung to her cheek. You tried not to look at her face, but your eyes betrayed you. Her mouth was still open, as if her final breath had been interrupted. The bell rang that evening. Once. The first toll echoed down the valley like an old wound reopened. The pigeons scattered, dogs whimpered, and every cradle in town seemed to creak at once. 3 days later, it rang again. Then twice in one morning. Then it didn't stop. Fathers carried sons wrapped in blankets. Mothers clutched limp girls against their breast, refusing to let go even as they lowered them into the ground. Infants died in silence, before they could even cry. Toddlers screamed until their throats tore. The fever spared no age under 10, and yet, it touched no one older. That was what frightened them most. Not just the deaths, but the precision. This wasn't like the plague of 21. That one took everyone, men, women, monks, even the mayor's wife. But this had a preference, a cruelty. It moved from child to child, like it knew what it was doing. Physicians came, examined pustules, checked pulses, bled the healthy and the dying alike. They called it variola major, smallpox. But smallpox had rules, didn't it? It took the weak, the old. It needed time to spread. It showed mercy to some. This didn't. They tried treatments, mercury baths, herbal rubs, hot bricks under the bed. They burned linens, bled the feet, fed children onion wine through trembling spoons. Nothing worked. You remember the second week? That's when the town lost the ability to pretend. The school closed, mid-lesson. Desks overturned, slates left scribbled with unfinished letters. The market shuttered. Wheat rotted in sacks, meat spoiled on the hooks. Even the dogs stopped barking, as if the town itself held its breath. The priest, Father Dumas, refused to ring the bell anymore. Said the tolls haunted his dreams. He hadn't slept in days, and his hands shook when he lifted the censer. He told you, quietly, that the Virgin herself had turned her face from the town. So you rang the bell instead. You climbed the tower each dawn and dusk, pulling the rope with both hands. 1 toll for each child lost since the last. Some days, 4. Some days 10. One day 15. By the 3rd week, the graveyard behind the chapel was full. You began burying them in the fields. Shallow pits, because the earth was still frozen in places. The coffins were rushed, sometimes just a plank, sometimes only cloth. You dug until your palms blistered. You stopped saying prayers. There were too many names and they blurred together. One child had no name at all, left at the chapel steps the morning before she died. You buried her with Marie Claire's doll, the one you'd found in the gutter 2 weeks earlier. The wind changed that day. The air smelled of ash and milk, sweet and sour. You told yourself it was nothing, but it stayed. Inside houses, the silence grew loud. Mothers no longer wept aloud. Fathers stared at walls. Siblings slept in corners, alone. Entire families disappeared overnight. The local healer, Madame Leger, claimed it was divine punishment. For what, she didn't say. But people began whispering again about sins, about witches, about the Romani caravan that passed through a month before. Superstition returned quickly, as it always does. Salt was poured across thresholds. Prayers were nailed to doors. One man tried to drown his son before the fever could take him. The boy survived. The father did not. You remember him well. He asked for forgiveness with his last breath. No one answered. By the end of the 4th week, even hope began to die. Children who hadn't yet fallen ill were kept in basements. Some were tied to beds, just in case. One girl was locked in a pantry for 12 days. Her parents died upstairs. She lived. When they found her, her hair had turned white. You rang the bell 15 times that night. The only doctor still treating patients was Jean-René Giraud, a man whose own children had died in the first wave. He no longer shaved, rarely spoke. He carried a notebook in which he recorded symptoms but never names. He believed the plague was evolving, changing to adapt to innocence. He believed it fed on purity. No one argued. By the 6th week, there were more graves than homes. The town hall was turned into a morgue. No candles, just rows of cloth-covered shapes. A chalkboard near the door listed numbers. It was wiped clean every morning. You stopped reading it. You stopped speaking mostly. Only the bell gave you voice now. You began to dream in tolls, in numbers. You saw their faces in puddles, in candlelight. You heard lullabies in the rustle of wheat. And still, no one left. Where would they go? The sickness followed the wind. It rode the carts and clung to boots. One family tried to flee. Their wagon was found overturned near the river. The children had died first. The parents followed. A note was pinned to the mother's dress. Better in the woods than in that town of graves. No one retrieved them. Not even you. By the second month, the fever began to slow. Fewer coughs, fewer cries. A day passed without a bell. Then two. But you did not relax. You knew better. It wasn't mercy. It was exhaustion. The plague had taken what it came for. The cradles were all empty now. You wake before the bell. It is the first morning you don't feel its weight tugging you toward the chapel tower. The sky is grey, washed with pale orange where the sun tries to rise, but there is no warmth in it, only silence. You step outside. The cold bites deeper than it should for spring. The streets are empty utterly, perfectly empty. Not the kind of emptiness you learn to ignore in early hours or after curfews. This is the stillness of abandonment, a stillness that feels chosen. You don't see smoke from chimneys. No laundry swaying from windows. The baker's awning has collapsed. Its wooden frame, once wrapped in red linen, lies broken in the gutter. The bread sign dangles by one nail, creaking with each shift of the wind. And then you hear it. Not a voice, not a footstep, a door. Just one, far down the Rue des Anges. A soft, hollow groan as if someone opened it not to leave, but to listen. You don't move, because you remember what it used to sound like here. Morning carts rattling across cobblestones, traders shouting over fish buckets, children arguing about marbles and saints. Now there are only doors that open slowly, cautiously if at all. You pass the tailor's shop, still shuttered. Faded chalk on the door reads, "Mercy within." The candles inside have long burned out. You can just make out the outline of a body through the warped glass. Someone tried to drag it away but gave up halfway. Farther down, you see Saint Antoine's chapel. You used to ring the bell from its tower twice a day without fail. But the bell rope was cut last week. Sabotaged. They said they couldn't bear the sound anymore. Said it made the dead restless. You enter the chapel alone now. The pews are scattered. Candles puddled into dried wax on the floor. The altar is untouched. But there's a strange quietness in its presence, like it knows it has failed. You kneel out of habit, not belief. And then you see Iton the steps where Marie-Claire once sang. A set of small footprints. Still damp. Still warm. You follow them out. They lead not to a house, but to the well. You knew the well had become a place of superstition. Some said its water had turned black, others that it cured the cough. You'd seen people toss herbs, rosaries, coins into its mouth. One woman even threw in her own shoes, hoping her child would walk again. But today, the footprints stop at the well's edge. And nothing else. No body, no note, just a small ribbon silk-teed to the wooden rail. You don't recognize it, or maybe you do and cannot admit it. You return to the street. Still empty. Still watching. There are no priests now. Father Dumas vanished a week ago. Some say he went into the woods. Others say he drowned himself in the river after burying 3 generations of one family. The new priest, if you can call him that, is a boy named Luc. 17. Thin as a whip, with eyes that never close fully. He wears the vestments like borrowed skin. He does not preach. He writes names. He comes each morning to chalk the doors of the dead. He stopped marking crosses. Now he draws a single line. Some say it's a tally. Others say it's a wound. You ask him once why he keeps count. He says, so someone remembers. Even the midwives are gone. The last one, old Celine, burned her own linens and sat on the roof of her cottage until she froze. No one touched her body. The crows came first. You find yourself speaking less. Not from grief. Grief requires energy. It's the silence that wears you down. A silence so complete it becomes language. A bowl left on a doorstep means food is inside. A red scarf tied to a fence means someone died there. A locked window means a child is still alive. And then there's the singing. It began quietly. One voice. A girl, perhaps 10 years old, singing a lullaby near the town square. Her voice was broken in places, like glass, but she sang as though someone was listening. No one stopped her. The next night, there were 3 voices. By the week's end, there were 20. Not together, not in chorus. Just scattered through the town. Different songs, some hymns, some cradle tunes, some with no words at all. You don't know if they're meant for the living or the dead, but you listen. One evening you hear a voice near the apothecary. A child, barely 6, singing the same melody over and over. You follow it, slowly, like not to frighten the sound. But when you turn the corner, there is no one. Just a pile of dried flowers on the doorstep. Lavender, rosemary, sage. The kind mothers used to boil into steam when their children had fever. You pick up a sprig. It's warm. Somewhere, someone is still trying. You begin to see chalk drawings on the walls. Stick figures holding hands, suns with too many rays, faces with no mouths. One drawing shows a house on fire. Inside it, cradles. You start to understand that the children who remain are leaving their own record. No journals, no letters, just traces. Songs, footprints, symbols, because no one else will. You return home, or what passes for it. A room with 1 chair, 1 bed, and a window that faces nothing. You light a candle, but you do not pray. You wait, and you listen, because now the street is not empty. It breathes differently. It is not the same town anymore. It is a place where ghosts are young, and the living are old. A place where bells no longer ring, but songs still drift. And tomorrow, you will follow them, because someone must. You begin with a name. One name, carved into a strip of wood, taken from the frame of a broken door. You use a nail, sharpened with stone. It tears the grain as you work, but the letters hold. Emile. He was 5. You don't remember the sound of his voice, only the way he held a piece of bread like it was treasure. You found him under a cart 2 weeks ago. No one claimed him. No one asked. You wrapped him in linen and placed a stone on his chest, as if it might weigh down what was already gone. Now his name rests in your satchel. You have 37 others. Some are just initials, some half-finished words. One tag reads, Petit oiseau, little bird. That's all the child was known as. She used to mimic sparrows near the well. They say it's foolish what you're doing, that names don't save anyone. But they forget. The plague takes names first, long before it takes the body. It erases the sound of someone being called. So you begin collecting. Not artifacts. Memories. You break the rules of burial, because the rules have changed. You no longer wait for priests or papers or confirmation. When you find a body, you look for signs. A scarf, a ribbon, a word etched on skin. Sometimes it's nothing more than the smell of the house, or the way a window is left open. You write it down, in the ledger that belonged to the parish before the priests vanished. Its pages were once blank after page 47. You are now on page 92. Each line holds a story you cannot tell, only hint at. Girl, curly hair, found near fountain, doll clutched in right hand. Twins, 3 winters old, house of Severine, door marked with 3 cuts. Boy, known to hum, left sugar cubes near the chapel gate. You write these entries with a quiet your hands have learned. Not from peace, but from practice. The town is different now. It no longer smells of death. That stench has faded, or maybe you've stopped noticing. What lingers instead is mould and rot, and the faint perfume of old prayers still clinging to altar stones. You meet others like you once a week, near the vineyard ruins. A woman with red-threaded fingers. She embroiders names into torn bedsheets, hangs them like flags. A man who cannot speak. He draws maps of where each child was found, not to trace the spread, but to remember the pattern. A boy, maybe 9, who builds cairns of stones outside houses no longer standing. He places 1 white stone atop each mound. No one taught him. He says nothing. Together, you form a ritual. No one leads it. No one dares speak of blessings, but there is rhythm, quiet, reverence. You read a few names aloud, not to claim them, just to say them again. Some nights you stay too long. The wind in the ruins mimics the sighs of those who never escaped. You imagine their voices rising like mist through the stone, watching as you bend to write their children into memory. And then, one day, the ledger is gone. You had hidden it beneath the altar at St. Antoine's, wrapped in waxed cloth. But now the cloth is torn, the book taken. In its place, a candle, burned down to wax puddles, and a single word, written in ash across the altar cloth. Continue. You don't know who wrote it. You don't ask, because you've already begun another book. This one stitched by hand, bound with thread pulled from burial gowns. Its first page is blank. Not out of despair, but because this time the names will be written not just with ink, but with song. The children sing still. Their voice is more frequent now. In alleyways, in courtyards, beneath floorboards. You follow them. One melody leads you to a cellar filled with dolls, each one tagged with a date. Another brings you to a ruined schoolhouse, where tiny chairs have been arranged in perfect rows. No one sits. But the blackboard reads, "Today we remember." You add chalk names to it, as many as you can. That night, you dream of walking through streets where names float in the air like snow, each one a breath taken by a child, now suspended in silence. You reach out to catch them, but they melt before your touch. You wake with the image still in your lungs. So you carve faster. You gather scraps of wood, cloth, leather, anything that can hold a name. Your satchel grows heavier, not with grief, with purpose. And as you walk, others begin to follow. Not many, but enough. A girl with ink-stained fingers who writes poems beside your carvings. An old woman who hums the lost lullabies. A mason who engraves initials into stone walls as if the buildings themselves must learn to remember. You don't speak much. You don't need to. You've become the memory collector. Not because you chose to, but because forgetting was louder, and someone had to silence it. The silence has changed. It used to be full of sobs, prayers, and whispers wrapped in fear. Now it is still. Not peaceful, not hopeful, just still. Like a lake after all the stones have been thrown. You stand on the hill above the town, what's left of it. The steeple of St. Antoine is a jagged tooth against the sky. The market square is overgrown. Even the cobblestones seem to sag under the weight of names unspoken. But no new bells have rung in 13 days. You count them each morning, not in hope, but as a measure, a calendar etched not by sun or moon, but by the absence of sound. It might be over. You don't trust that thought, because plagues never end cleanly. They don't bow and exit. They fade, recede, hide in corners like rats under floorboards. Still, the fever is gone, the breathless nights, the crimson fingertips, the silent cradles. There is a pause, and into that pause, something fragile begins to return. You hear a door creak open, a broom sweep a doorstep, a spoon stir something warm. You see a face-gaunt, pale, cautious peer from behind curtains left untouched for weeks. Then another. Then a child's hand reaching for a moth on a windowsill. You find yourself staring not at ghosts, but at survivors. Not many, but enough. You walk the town, no longer counting bodies. Instead, you count names still remembered. Sebastian, who used to paint shutters blue, he's alive, though one arm won't move. Yvette, the midwife. Her house smells of lavender again. She sings while she boils herbs. And in the square, 2 girls draw circles in the dust. They take turns stepping inside them, laughing when the other falls out. You recognize one of them, but not the name. So you ask. She tells you, "My name is Jean." You smile, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because she says it out loud, as if it matters, as if it belongs. That night, you open the ledger. You've started again, not just for the lost, but for the left behind. You list the names of the living. You add where they were found, what they now do, what they dream of. One page reads, "Jean dances in circles, laughs like something new, You call it the Book of Remains, not because it holds the dead, but because it holds what remains of the living. You begin visiting houses, slowly, with respect. Some invite you in, others stare through the crack in their doors and say nothing, but no one turns you away. You listen. You write. You ask, "What name shall I carry for you?" Some give their own, some give a child's, a wife, a sister, a friend who didn't make it. You take them all. In a town that once echoed with loss, the sound of a name spoken becomes a blessing. Then one morning, you return to the cemetery. The air is damp, the soil still soft from recent burials. You walk the rows of unnamed mounds. Some are marked with stones, some with scraps of cloth, some with nothing. You kneel. From your satchel, you pull the final name, the one you've carried longest, the one you've never spoken aloud, because it was yours. Before the plague, you had another life, a name spoken by someone who held you, called to you, forgave you. You had forgotten it, not because time took it, but because silence drowned it. Now you remember. You whisper it into the earth, not as a farewell, but as a return. The grass doesn't stir, the clouds don't part, but you feel lighter. And then you hear a voice behind you. A child. "Who are you writing for?" You turn. He's small, maybe 6, barefoot, eyes the color of storm-wet bark. You say, "For you." He frowns. "But I'm not gone." "No," you say, "and that's why I'm writing." He watches you, then nods. "Then write this. My name is Henri. I like to chase crows, and I remember my sister's hands." You do. In your book you write, "Henri ran with birds, remembered warmth." He stands there a moment longer, then runs off. You never see him again, but that name stays open on the page for days. You carry it with you, because remembering doesn't end when silence begins. It begins again with every voice that dares to return, every step that crosses the threshold of a home, every laugh that rises where crying once lived, and with every name spoken not to summon the past, but to build a present where it's not forgotten. So now, you walk not just as the one who witnessed, but as the one who remembers, because the plague took everything, except your memory, and that is how the last name becomes the first again. There is no monument for this, no polished stone or gilded plaque, no cathedral choir that sings only for them, the ones who danced until their hearts gave out, the ones who buried children in silence, the ones whose names dissolved with the fever, forgotten before the ink could dry. But you remember. You remember the rhythm of their steps first light, then frantic. You remember the prayers no one answered. You remember the ledger in your lap, the quill in your trembling hand, the names that blurred not because of time but because of tears. You were there. You saw it. And that is enough. Not to fix it, not to undo it, but to keep it from vanishing, because memory is the last rebellion against erasure. And sometimes, it's the only thing left we can offer the dead. There are children's graves with no stones, but you remember one who liked to chase crows. There are husbands who vanished behind doors that never opened again, but you remember the color of their boots. There are women who nursed the sick until their arms fell limp, but you remember the lullabies they whispered, not for comfort, but for defiance. And now, you remember. That is the quiet contract you've made by surviving. Not to shout, not to avenge, not even to speak aloud, but simply to carry the names. And perhaps, when someone asks you one day what you remember of that strange summer in 1518, you will not say the plague, or the dancing, or the death. You will say, "I remember Jean who laughed like something new. I remember Henri who ran with birds. I remember myself, who forgot their name, then found it again in the silence." The church bells ring again now, not for mourning, but for returning, and so you rise, ledger in hand, quill tucked behind your ear, not because the story is done, but because someone, somewhere, will need you to remember them too. And when they ask, you will say, "I was there. I remember. And now, so do you.